as in like one porter and then two neighbors. The gutter scheme will be through the two neighbors and the porter, so they will, all three of them will be looking to the water as a source in the monsoon season and afterwards.
And Neil touched on the space limitations that may be inhibiting the implementation of rainwater harvesting systems now. In the future, potentially, we would consider maybe if we could find enough area, build a large tank that could hold enough water for a city block that they could come to over a period of time. But that would be in the future.
You mentioned that the primary concern is with quantity and not quality. But I think what I saw was that the usage of the water from the rainwater harvesting would not be for drinking. Is that right? It would just be for bathing and for laundry. Is the primary quantity concern drinking water? And if so, how does this solve that problem?
Exactly. The municipal corporation only supplies, the slum residents are allotted about 40 liters per person per day, which is a very, as Neil said, about a tenth of what we use here. So what we hope to do with the rainwater harvesting is provide them a source of water that they can use for the bathing, the cooking, and then that 40 liters per day that they're allotted, they can use that strictly for drinking. So it does increase their...
Yeah, the tap water that's provided by the BMC is known throughout the country to be one of the best, like the cleanest water and good quality water compared to all the other cities in India. So it's a very good thing that they have right now. It's just the quantity that's the concern.
I have a question. You said that you are going to convert the pits for the rainwater harvesting. So what's the current use of those pits? I mean, are they used in some other operation after you convert them to the pits for converting into rainwater harvesting? Are their normal day-to-day business going to get affected by that?
Well, as I mentioned, in the monsoon season, they do not have the pottery industry going, so therefore they can use this solely for water storage.
So how long is this storage going to be?
It will extend about a month or two beyond the monsoon season, depending on how they want to use the water after monsoon season ends.
So this whole harvesting is just for 2 months over the whole period. Your solution will provide them water for only 2 months?
Well, for the monsoon, 4 months, and then the 2 months afterwards, which are actually the hottest months in Bombay, the extremely unbearable heat over there. So that's what we're mainly aiming at.
If we were, and then we alluded to other areas in the slums could potentially use their small barrels during the monsoon season as well. They could fill those up, and so those would, during the monsoon season, is when it would be beneficial to them. But in the pottery area, because they have those large pits, we think it could extend further after the monsoon season, perhaps a month or two.
Have you seen this rainwater collection idea used in other slum areas or other areas where they're really short on water?
We haven't found much in other slum areas, but the municipal corporation, and not only in Mumbai, but in other parts of India, the government is actually requiring rainwater harvesting to be included in new construction for buildings of a certain size. So rainwater, it is a very popular and becoming more popular method for enhancing people's water supply, but we haven't seen much in slums. So
it's an extremely in thing nowadays, so they're encouraging it so much. In the future for our project as well, we can even try and collaborate with the BMC, the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai, and they might even help us out. And the bureaucracy and red tape that's involved with all of their working, we usually have to wait for months before we get even any responses from them due to their slow governmental responses. But in this case, it's actually known to be very fast because they're so involved in the rainwater harvesting nowadays and encouraging it.
And just to touch it, a lot of, in our rainwater harvesting system, this current phase, we're primarily looking at the bathing and drinking. We aren't intending for drinking, but there are a lot of the larger scale systems where they do implement filters or disinfection procedures. So that could be something that we consider in the future as this gains popularity in slum areas.
So a couple questions on the business model. Did you come up with what the costs are initially of installing a system?
We came up with a really brief cost estimate to install, to put the concrete liner in a pit and have,
Okay.
the small.
You're definitely going to want that in your final presentation. Is here's what the costs are, here's what the monthly cost would be for a person, with a loan, and I'd want to look for I don't know how long a person stays in a slum, do they move around a lot?
No,
What's-
they've been there for generations now,
Okay.
so.
So you want, that kind of understanding of what's the likelihood that they'll default on the loan, so that you can build it up. And the other thing I might, not that you have a lot of time, but you wanna look at what other things could you look at next? Cause an investor's going, investor knows that at this stage you don't have all the answers. They just wanna know, do you have enough to fund the next bit? But I'm wondering if someone who collects water can sell it, because the more you can get the person that's collecting the water to have some real reason to wanna be a part of it, it can start growing on its own. So look at that maybe a little bit.
That was one thing we
Yeah.
discussed for
Okay.
at length, and the issue came back to the space availability and storage, but yeah, exactly. If we can find a space to put a big tank,
Okay.
that's exactly what we're.
So, and then also I'm wondering if you have any assumptions, just big assumptions that you just don't know the answer to yet.
I think this is a new system in this slum. Rainwater is a pretty new concept. So I think the initial barrier of implementing it is kind of an assumption. We're assuming that since this is popular, since this makes a lot of sense, people will be eager to jump in and
So how would you validate your assumption?
Well, they have said so themselves that they're willing to be a part of this.
But they
I mean,
said, in market, well, maybe the marketers know this a lot. You
yeah.
can ask a market something and they'll tell you, oh, sure, I would love that. Then you make the product and no one buys it. So is there, and I'm not asking you to do this by the final, because that, of course, would never be possible. But what would you do next to validate whatever assumptions you have, whether they're technical or marketing? Because what we'll want to know is what's the next steps. What would you want to do? What happens next? And that's part of the trip to India too. So, the winning team will go to India for a couple of weeks and it will be looking at, okay, what do we do next and where do we get there? But being upfront about it's not all nice and neat and packaged and it's done, but here's kind of where the questions are is not a bad thing in a business pitch. Unless I hear something different from the business people.
do you want an answer to the question or?
Yeah.
Okay, we have that too. So what we are doing is our Indian counterparts are taking the design ideas that we've got and compiled and asking and particularly Cumberwater residents, if there are concerns about the possible solution. Again, you're right, we know that it's not always the perfect answer, but just learning from them. Of course, they are the experts in this scenario. And so, and that's our biggest step right now. Following that, again, trying to partner with another organization. We anticipate that we would learn a lot from that group as well. There are a lot of organizations that have published their findings, and so we'll be digging more thoroughly through those as well. So, research mostly on the ground, but also from this end.
Okay, sounds good, yeah. Good.
I have a question. So in the summer, in the monsoon months, they're not using the pits for the pottery,
Correct.
but the pits are open to rainwater
Yes.
to pour into it directly. So you see a guided gutter supplying more water in that gutter, in the pit, versus just the rain falling into the pit.
But it's also that the pits aren't lined, so they're basically just dirt, dirt pits right now.
So if you lined it
Yeah.
and then just let rain just nature take its, do its thing, wouldn't the pit just fill up anyway?
But it would be okay. go ahead.
Using it, depending on how much water they use, that might be adequate, but by having the roof area in there, you can increase the amount of water that would,
So
That
then are
would-
we storing water on the roof also? No.
not on the
just
roof. Just,
Guiding that water via
Because-
gutter to come into the pit, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And otherwise the water would also just come through the surface to the pit. Just flow off through the concrete surface, which is extremely dirty. So
and to keep some of the contamination out there, most of these pits actually have, and they're usually like sandbag or some type of wall to keep runoff from coming in. So in terms of the rainwater harvesting potential, it's just the area of the pit. But that is a large potential. The rain just falling in the pit, it's going to provide a lot of water, but the roof can add even more.
So you've actually asked residents, gotten some feedback, or would you be willing to let us, would you be willing to pay the cost to install a gutter to increase your water storage in the pit by this much? They may